Hello and welcome back to the channel. We have a brand new tutorial series starting today. If you haven't seen the preview for this, it's only a minute and a half. I will link that down in the description, but this is what we are going to be creating. This is Megaman, and we have animations and some basic controls. And then we have one of the features that I believe started with Megaman X, and that is the wall jump and wall slide. So if we can't get to this higher up ledge, we can use the jump to reach places that we couldn't before. And then we added some effects for the little dust particles falling off of the wall as he's sliding down. So pretty cool little mechanic. It's pretty easy. This shouldn't take us too long to put together. I am ready to get started if you are. This project will work in Construct 2 as well. There shouldn't be any problems with that. So whichever version you have, let's go ahead and start a new project. I'm going to call mine MM for Megaman Wall Jump Tutorial or TUT. You can call yours whatever you want. Just make sure that you give it a name. And for the viewport size, I'm going to knock this down to a 640 by 360. I'm going to keep it landscape. Let's go ahead and check this box for optimize for pixel art. So go ahead and create it. So there's our viewport, that dotted line. And over here we see it 640 by 360, just like we set it. And if I zoom out, this other light gray area is the layout size. So if you click anywhere on the layout, you should have your layout properties over here in the properties panel. And I'm going to change the work area that we're dealing with. So in where it says size, I'm just going to change that to 1200 for the width, 1000 for the height. And then before we get too far, even though we gave it a name, which you'll see up here in your project panel, the very top folder will be the name of your game. We still haven't saved it. So go ahead and click this Save Project button and find a place to save it, whether you're saving on cloud storage or to your computer's hard drive, wherever you manage your Construct 3 files, find a place to save this. I'm going to go ahead and save mine. Another thing I want to do, the background is this dark gray, and then this layer is this light gray. And if we come over here to our layers panel, yours may not look like mine. Actually, yours probably doesn't look like mine at all. If you don't have a layers panel, you can go into menu, view, bars, and these are all the panels available. And when you click on one, it will put it on the screen for you, and then you can grab these headers of each panel and drag and drop them wherever you want them to go. So I'm going to put mine back to where I had it and kind of move these around like that. So wherever your layers panel is, click on the default layer 0. And when you do that, it'll bring it up in the properties panel. And I'm going to tick the box that says transparent. Now there is no color to the layer. And I do this just because this will give us a black background, which I prefer to work with until I get my own artwork in. Now we can double click anywhere on the layer, and that'll bring up our object dialog box and scroll down to sprite, and then just click anywhere to insert. If you are following along with this project exactly how I am doing it, then you will want to download the sprites. I have provided them in a link below. Get those downloaded and put them in a folder somewhere where you know where they are. And once you have done that, we can come up to this little folder icon and load image from file. You will have these 4 folders and this level sheet. You will not have this. This is the sprite sheet that I use to cut all the sprites from. Make sure you have all of these, and I'm going to start with the idle. Click on that sprite and open, and it automatically resizes to the size of our sprite. So I'm going to come over here and rename it. For animations, I start with A and I, and an underscore, and then what it is. And this one is idle. I'm going to set this speed to 0. There's only 1 frame, so we don't necessarily need to do that, but good practice. Okay, let's right click over in the animations panel and add an animation. And we're going to do the same thing. Go to the folder, And this time I'm going to import the jump, and I will rename it ANI underscore jump. I'm going to set the speed to 0. Let's right click and add another animation. Import, and this will be the run. Now there are 10 sprites here, so I'm going to click the very first sprite, then hold down Shift and click the last sprite. That will select all of them. Then we can open, and it will place all 10 of them in sequential order. So let's rename that ANI underscore run. And this time the speed is going to be a little bit faster. I'm going to try 10. And before we preview that to see what it does, make sure you have the origin tool highlighted, and you can either press 2 if you have a number pad on your keyboard, and that will put it at the bottom middle. Alternatively, you can go over here to the image points panel, right click on the origin, go to quick assign and choose bottom. That will be bottom in the middle. Now, once you have that done, right click on the origin again and choose apply to whole animation. That way, that image point will be in the bottom middle of every frame. So let's right click on the run animation and preview. Couple of things. One, it's pretty slow. And 2, he stops. So let's select that Annie run animation, and I'm going to bump this up to 16 and check the loop. Let's try that again. Preview. I think that looks pretty good. With the speed that we're going to give him in his controls, I think this will work pretty well. Okay, one more. Let's right click and add an animation. Go to the folder to import and navigate to Annie wall slide. Import that. And then we can change the name ANI underscore wall slide. And then the speed to 0. If we go back to our animation run, we already set our image point to where we want it here. I want that to be the same for every animation. Since this already has the image point where we want it, I'm going to right click on the origin and apply to all animations. That will apply to all of these animations. See, there it is, and there it is. If we go up to the idle, and now we're going to set the collision box, and it's pretty weird. You can right click on any one of these nodes and choose set to bounding box, and that'll give us a square. And then I'm going to go into my grid settings up here and configure grid, and I'm going to set my grid width and height to 2 and my snap to edges. And then I just chose white for the grid color because it shows up a lot better to me. Okay, and then if we press on the grid symbol, it'll turn the grid on. So now we have snapping to every 2 pixels. So I'm going to drag this top node in and drag this top node in, and then I'll do the same down here to match those. So what we have is an X of 6 and an X of 24 for these 2 nodes, both the top and the bottom. I am going to right click on that and apply to all animations. Now it's not going to be the same for all of them because some of them are different sizes. So you see it's not aligned directly to the grid in this one because the frame is a different size. But we can just go in and easily clean these up. So that's 6 and 22. Do the same down here. And that snapping helps quite a bit. I'm going to go to wall slide and make sure that that collision box is aligned with the grid. One thing I want to do here, I'm actually going to slide this over to that one. So we have, I'm going to turn the grid off for just a second. The wall that he'll be sliding down will be flush with his hitbox, which is our collision box here. So he will slightly overlap the wall, but that is the effect that we want. Because if his collision box was all the way over to where his feet end, then his hand would not look like it is grabbing onto the wall. Okay, I'm going to turn the grid back on, and we're going to go over to run. And this one, we will move to 8 and 28. And these down here to 8, and that one to 28. So you should have something that looks like that. Now on the run animation, since we have 10 frames, we can set up this box for this first frame and then right click on any of the nodes. And this time we're going to say apply to whole animation. So that will only affect this one run animation. So now our entire animation has the hitbox in the same place. And with that, our player sprite should be set up. Exit out of that, and here he is. We can zoom in and look at him. With him selected, I'm going to rename him player. Something you want to be doing all the time in any project you're working on, even tutorials, is to hit this little save icon anytime you think about it. Even though you may have autosave set up, which I do on mine, but it is still a good idea to manually save it yourself. I'm going to just click anywhere on the layout, and that'll bring up our layout properties. And I'm going to set my grid size to 16, 16. And then I'm going to click snap to grid. And if you want to, you can turn your grid on and it'll show you where the grid is. But I don't want the grid showing on mine, so I'm going to turn mine off. But for now, we're going to leave snap to grid on. Then we can double click on the layout and scroll down and get ourselves a new sprite. Insert it, and I'm going to change the size to 16 by 16. The origin I'm going to set in the bottom left corner. And you can set your origin in any corner, but just make sure that it is in a corner. That way everything can snap to grid and we won't have anything overlapping or looking real awkward. I'm going to grab the paint bucket tool and I'm going to pick a green color. You can pick any color you want. Does not matter. So I filled that square with green. I'm going to exit out of it. And with it selected, I'm going to rename it Collision. You can name yours whatever you want. This is going to act as both our ground and our wall. Okay, I'm going to zoom out a little and I'm going to bring this ground object somewhere down around here. And I am going to stretch it out to right about there. That should be good. That's a width of 304. So I'll move that up just a little. Then with it selected, I'm going to hold Control on the keyboard, click and drag out a copy. And I'm going to stretch it out the other way. Zoom in just a little bit. And I'm going to place this right on the edge and stretch this out to about, let me zoom out a little more. You can go pretty tall. Let's say about 544. Okay, and then with that selected, Control, click, and drag out a copy to the other side, just like that. And then we can select this bottom one again and Control, click, and drag out a copy to the very top. Okay, I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. I'm going to put our player down here on the ground and select this bottom collision again and Control, click, drag out another copy and move it in. I'm going to have this a length of 176, and I'm going to move it up from the ground to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He's going to be able to jump about as tall as this ledge, but he won't be able to jump onto it, which is why we need him to have the ability to jump off the wall. And I'm going to zoom out a little and Control, click, and drag out another copy and put one up here. Make this one about 80 in width. And just eyeball it somewhere in the middle, about there, maybe right there. Okay, I'm going to choose the collision object over here in the project panel and come back over to the properties and edit behavior, add a new behavior, and choose solid. All right, so now we can give our player, if we select it in the project panel, we can give our player the behavior of platform. Okay. So if we go in and we play this, we can use our arrow keys to move around. Unfortunately, we are in the top left corner because you can see the top left corner of our collisions here. So I'm going to exit out of that. And what we were seeing was this dotted line. We were seeing inside this box. That's our viewport. So we need to follow our player. Now, one way we could do it is to select our player, go into edit behaviors, and give it a behavior of scroll to. That would work. However, I'm going to create a camera and attach it to the player. So exit out of all of that, and let's double click on the layer and scroll down to sprite, and let's insert a sprite. And I'm going to make this a width of 16 and a height of 16. And then let's get the origin in 5 on the number pad, or right click, quick assign, and middle. We'll put it right in the middle. Then I'm going to select the circle, and I'm going to choose a nice red color and a border thickness of 1, and check the border, and nothing else checked. And if we start in the top left corner and click and drag out, we can get a circle. And if you hold shift, it'll constrain that to a circle. Drag it to the bottom right, and we have a circle that fills the whole box. You don't have to do this. This is just something that I do that visually represents a camera for me when I'm in a project. So now I'm going to get the line tool, and I have a thickness of 2, and I'm just going to draw a line that is 2 pixels thick on the top and the bottom, if I can get it right. Okay, there we go. And then I'm going to select a white color, the paint bucket tool, and fill in these spots. So we got like a little target looking thing. With that selected, let's rename this camera. Okay, with the camera selected, over here in the properties, we need to edit behaviors, add a new behavior, and add that scroll to. Okay, if we play this, I have the camera off to the side. Now that camera is in the middle of this whole screen. Cool. And if I move it over here to our player and play it, now our player's in the middle of the screen. So the camera, the game camera, is going to follow our camera object. And that brings us to our first piece of code. I am going to save and then hop over into the event sheet and add an event. And let's pick system. And up here in the search bar, I'm just going to type in on start, and it brings it up on start of layout. Then I'm going to add an action. I'm going to grab our camera object, and I want to set the position to another object. Then we can select what object, and that would be the player. And the image point is 0, which that'll put it at the bottom middle of our player. Over here on the layout, we have our camera off to the side. If I play this, now the camera is set to the bottom middle of our player. Okay, let's go ahead and select the camera object again and go to edit behaviors, add a new behavior, and let's add the pin behavior. Now we can go back into our event sheet and on start of layout, after our set position action, let's add another action, go into our camera object, scroll down to the pin behavior, and let's pin to object. And that object is going to be our player. And I want the X position, the Y position. I do not need the angle, so that should be good. Now if we play it, we can move our character around. And he has a really high jump, so he doesn't need to wall jump to get to that ledge. We will change that later. So our camera is good for now. We will come back and add something to the camera at the end of this tutorial. Click on the camera object over here in the project panel. Make sure that the properties are up over here. Scroll down towards the bottom and it says initially visible. I'm going to untick that so it won't show up. And if we play, there's our player and the camera is still following him. All right. Okay, one more thing to get us set up in this video. In your layers panel, wherever it happens to be, right click in the empty space and add layer to the bottom. And let's rename this background. And then I'm going to click on layer 0 and rename this game. So now we have 2 layers. Last I checked, the free version will only allow you up to 2 layers. And that's fine for this project. We will be able to fit everything on these 2 layers with no problem. In the paid version, you have unlimited amount of layers, which in that case, you would want everything on its own layer. The collisions would be on a layer, the player, the camera, the background art we're about to create would all be on their own layers. But for now, we will work with 2. So let's click on the background layer, make sure it's selected, and then double click on the layout. And let's scroll down to, we have tiled background and tile map. We want tile map. Insert, we can just click to insert that wherever. And let's go up here to the folder. And in your assets folder that you downloaded, if you are following along, we have this level sheet. Let's go ahead and import that. And that is good. We are done with that. I'm going to exit out of that, and I'm going to zoom out to show you that the size has been automatically by default stretched to the entire workspace. If I select something and select the pencil tool, I can paint anywhere inside this area, but not outside of it. If I did want to paint outside of it, I would just extend it and then I could paint. So I'm going to undo everything I just did. Over here in our tilemap editor, again, if you don't have this panel open in your Construct 3, you can go to Menu and View, Bars, and Tilemap Bar. If we come over here to the properties, while we have the tilemap selected, we can see that we have a tile width and height of 32. And that's the size you're seeing of the selection box here, which looks pretty good. But this ledge down here, I'll zoom in a little, is only 16 in height because this other part is the background. For all this to work the way that I want it to, I'm going to change the tile width and height to both 16. So now I have a 16 by 16 square. Before I start painting, I'm going to click on the collision object in the project panel and come over to the properties, and I'm going to set the opacity to 40. So we're going to be able to see through it because we are dealing with the tile map, which is on the background layer, which is underneath all these collisions. I want to be able to see what I am painting. If we have the background layer selected and we click anywhere on the layout, it will select that tile map. I am going to select the pencil tool, and I'm going to drag a box from the top left of this background sprite all the way to the bottom right. So now I have this big chunk of sprites. I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to just start placing these side by side all the way across. And by doing this, the way the pattern is, the way I cut this pattern out, everything, all these pipes connect to each other. The pattern just repeats itself. So don't worry about being outside the lines. Just make sure that as you place these sprites, that the pipes connect with each other. Okay, I'm going to fill in the rest of this area. So now that we have the background laid down, we can lay some of these other sprites in its place. So I'm just going to draw a box around any one of these 4 walls up here. Each one of these is a section of wall. So with one of those selected, it doesn't matter what, I'm going to start painting in a wall. And I'm going to match it up with our green collision object. Something like that. And each one I'm going to pick a different section of wall to give it some randomness. Now something to look out for here is these sprites have shadows and highlights on them. Flipping and rotating them might cause some odd looking lighting or shadow effects. So that's why we have 4 different ones that we can choose from. So I'm going to finish stacking a few more walls, and we can even take just like this little square here will fit in there and not look weird, just doing it by itself like that. And then we can just start adding more on top of it. All right, so once you've made it to the top, let's go ahead and do the other side as well. Now for the roof here, I'll zoom in just a little. I'm going to take one of these little bricks and just paint in a little bit of roof. And actually we can use these smaller ones too, these 16 by 16 ones, to fill in here and there, just to add a little variation. And some of these bricks are different too. Okay. So we can turn the game layer off and see what we've made. I'm going to turn it back on. We're going to need us a guide down here as well. So again, we can click on our tile map and just grab some little bricks and select the pencil tool. And I'm going to fill in enough bricks to make a floor. Now we have all this extra background. So I'm just going to click and drag a square. It doesn't matter of what. We just want to get us a size of the box, and then select the eraser tool, and the eraser will be the size of that box we just dragged out. We can just get rid of the excess. This one I'm going to draw a long skinny box, and with the eraser still selected, get rid of that excess background. Okay, and if we turn the game layer off, looking pretty good. Okay, back on the background layer, we still have a couple of ledges to put in. Up here on this little floating ledge up here, we can drag a box around the width of that ledge and pencil tool, and it'll fit right in. And then down here, we can place this up against the wall, and then I'm going to zoom in to this, and I'm going to take from the second square over and just copy those two squares. This way it'll be able to repeat itself just like that. And then for the end, I'll take these last two squares and finish it off. Pretty good looking ledge. All right, zoom back out, and if we play, we still have our collision boxes. I'm going to change that. Let's select our collision object, scroll down, and initially visible, let's untick that, and then go back in. Let's play this. And now we have a level that we can work with. I find it to be more interesting if we have working artwork in a project. Moving around with different colored blocks sometimes can kill our motivation. I am a victim of that often, so I try to get at least some kind of placeholder artwork going in a project. I find that mentally and emotionally that helps me stick with a project more often. Might not work for everybody, but something to think about. Okay, that's going to do it for this video. Let's go ahead and make sure that we are saving often. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.